So after the initial authentication, the SAP Fiori applications can send the request to the ABAP backend server and to the HANA Access Engine directly as and if required. So this is in the addition to the normal request going from the front-end server. So till now we have seen how the security has to be done at the front-end server. Now, once that request reached to the front-end server, now the front-end server has to move that request to the back-end server. So the segregation of security configuration and settings is not clear. Generally, it's not clear in terms of what applies to the front end or the back end or both most of the time. So the transactional applications and the fact sheets send the OData request through the ABAP front-end server towards the back-end server. After the initial authentication, a session is established between the client and the front-end server. OData request towards the towards the backend server are then communicated using the trusted RFC connection. So as we can see in this slide, the OData request towards the backend server from the front-end server is going through the trusted RFC connection. For search in the SAP Fiori Launchpad, fact sheets also send INA protocol based search request from client to the backend server. So in case of the the Fiori Launchpad fact sheets, the search request will be going from my DMZ to directly to my backend server through the INA protocol based search request. So these requests can be authenticated using the Kerberos or X509 certificates or logon tickets and so on. So we can configure the front-end server to issue the logon tickets after the initial authentication, or we can use our existing infrastructure, so our PKI infrastructure, to do the same. For analytical applications, the web dispatcher forwards the OData request from client to Access Engine, and therefore the communication between the web dispatcher and the Access Engine needs to be established and with an HTTPS preceding it. So basically, now in this case the request is coming directly from my web dispatcher to my Access Engine. So this is how the communication happens from the front end to the back end, or from the gateway to the HANA Access Engine. Now, then we have the SSO options. So we have different SSO options which are available in SAP Fiori. So they are the SML 2.0, we have the SSO2 tokens, we have X509, we can use Kerberos. So we can use SAML 2.0 tokens, we can use the user certificates, Kerberos based authentication to enable SSO for Fiori. So based on the specific scenario that we are implementing, we can choose one method over the other. So this is, however, a decision that is affected by many factors, and we will have to take this call at the time of implementation. So basically we can choose any of these methods depending on our requirement, and this decision can be taken during the implementation phase. Now, what is SAML 2.0? So basically SAML 2.0 incorporates every critical use case and feature from every predecessor protocol into a single standard. So it requires a SAML identity provider. So there are the further capabilities like the federation capabilities, user mapping capabilities. It enables the single logout. It protects the authentication information with encryption or by using the opaque IDs. So let's see this thing in detail. Now, as it represents a superset of all the functionality in all 5 predecessors, SAML 2.0 makes them obsolete. So SAML 2.0 describes 2 roles for enabling the federation: the service provider and the identity provider. So my service provider is the entity that makes an application or a resource available to the user, while my identity provider is responsible for authenticating the user. The service provider and the identity provider, they exchange the messages to enable the single sign-on and single logout. These messages exchange can be initiated by the identity provider or by the service provider. So if we have implemented the security assertion markup language in its second version as a method of single sign-on within our organization, we can configure the ABAP front-end server to use SAML. And during the logon, the SAML 2.0 based authentication requires access to an issuing system called the identity provider to enable the single sign-on with SAML 2.0 for internet-facing deployment scenarios. And for these scenarios, it leverages its federation capabilities. And to do that, we must ensure that the identity provider is securely accessible from my outside corporate network. So let's see how SAML2 is actually we are using to provide the single sign-on and the single logout. So let's see that in a detail. So this is one of the use case which we are using to explain SAML 2.0. So it is a typical use case for SAP Fiori apps where the access should be granted from the public internet. So in this case, the single sign-on can be implemented using the SAML 2.0 based authentication in conjunction with the identity provider. So the user will need to authenticate themselves in a process known as service provider based authentication. So now let's see this in detail, like how it works. So first of all, this is the normal scenario, the complete scenario that the request is coming from the public internet. After that, we have the corporate DMZ layer, and then we have the internal corporate network wherein my gateway and my ECC system resides. So in between we have the corporate DMZ layer where we have the SAML 2.0 identity provider. Then we have the proxy, and then we have the public internet. So this is the step one, that is the client will send a request to my SAP NetWeaver gateway via a proxy server. So this request should be either unauthenticated or expired due to a timeout. So the request issued by the client refers to an external URL for the SAP Fiori app that is specific to the particular customer situation. So basically, as in the first step, my client is sending an unauthorized access request which is going to the proxy. Now, the proxy will rewrite this URL to its internal equivalent and forward this request to my SAP NetWeaver gateway. So as we can see in the picture below, that the proxy is forwarding the URL rewritten and forwarding it to SAP NetWeaver gateway. Now, the SAP NetWeaver gateway recognizes that the request is unauthenticated and could respond in one of the two ways. Either it will be using an HTTP post or an HTTP 302 redirect. So in this case, we will be showing it using the HTTP 302 redirect. So either way, the gateway server will respond to the client saying that I don't know who you are. So go talk to the SAML identity provider server. So all the URLs passing through the proxy server are rewritten as required. So we can see in the picture that the SAP NetWeaver gateway is sending the HTTP 302 request back to my proxy, and that will be sending to the client. Now, the client follows the HTTP 302 redirect URL and sends the request to my identity provider server. So in this case, the identity provider server is located behind the firewall. So the request goes through the proxy. However, if it is a cloud-based implementation, it would be a direct request. So in this case, since we have the proxy in between, so the request is going through the proxy. If it is a cloud-based implementation, the request between the client and the identity provider will be a direct request. Now, the SAML2 identity provider server challenges the client to identify itself. So at this point, the SAML2 identity provider server can be configured to accept whatever form of authentication is required by the customer security standards. For instance, it can be a basic authentication, it can be a form, or it can be a X509 certificate. So my identity provider is sending a question like, who are you, to the client. So the client responds by supplying the required credentials, and it can be an X509 certificate. Now, if the identity provider server determines the user credentials to be valid, it responds with another HTTP 302 to redirect the client back to the gateway server. However, this response now carries a SAML artifact with it. So my SAML identity provider is sending back again a redirect plus the SAML artifact to my client. Now, the client follows the HTTP 302 redirect URL and passes the SAML artifact back to the gateway server. Then, in order to double check the validity of the SAML artifact, the gateway server sends it back again to the identity provider for resolution as a back channel web service request. So here the gateway is saying to the SAML provider that I have received an artifact that claims to have come from you. So did you really create this artifact? So this type of double check is designed to prevent any third party from spoofing the artifacts. So my NetWeaver gateway will again go back to the identity provider to see whether this request actually came from it or it is a spoofing. Now, the SAML identity provider resolves the artifact and returns an assertion that says, yes, the artifact came from me and it identifies the user such and such. So my SAP NetWeaver gateway then validates the username in the assertion, and if successful, the user's request is considered as authentic and an ABAP session will be created. So now the OData service in SAP NetWeaver Gateway now starts and sends the data to the client. So from this point onward, the identity provider server takes no further part in the communication between the client and the gateway. So once the user either explicitly log off or closes the browser or allows their session to time out, any further client request will be considered as unauthenticated and the whole process will be repeated. So what does that mean is that once the authentication is completed, so the communication between the gateway and the client is a direct communication and there is no role of identity provider in between. But if in case the user logs off or closes the window or the session timed out, so again the authentication process has to be followed so that the user is authenticated again. So this is how SAML 2.0 works for authenticating the user. Now, so let's see what is SSO2 now. So in our case, the front-end server can connect to the SAP ERP, SAP Business Suite powered by SAP HANA. It can be a SAP HANA Access. So the ticket-based authentication is supported natively and the cookie is called My SAP SSO2. So it is a digitally signed by the issuing server. So what does that mean is, then when discussing the logon tickets after the successful authentication, the system issues the user with a logon ticket, which then that user can use to access the successive systems without repeating the steps. So the characteristics of a logon ticket include the fact that it's stored as a non-persistent cookie in the user's web browser. And it's going to be called as MySFP SSO2. So this non-persistent cookie which is getting stored in my user's web browser is my SAP SSO2. So it is deleted when the user logs off or closes that web browser and the session. So the maximum lifespan of the logon ticket can be specified, and it's done so by issuing system and the parameters that are set there. So it contains the user's ID and no password. So it's basically digitally signed by the ticket issuing server. So this digital signature is verified by the accepting systems, and on that basis the user access is allowed. So basically in case of SSO2, it will be my logon ticket will be stored as a non-persistent cookie into the web browser, and it will contain only the user ID. It doesn't contain any password. It will be basically digitally signed by the ticket issuing server. So once the session timed out or the user closes the web browser, so this cookie will be deleted. Now, after that, we have the X509. So in cryptography, X509 is an ITU-T standard for a public key infrastructure and privilege management. So my X509 are the user certificates, and it specifies the standard formats for public key certificates. For the certificates themselves, for revocation list, attribute certificates, and a certificate path validation algorithm. So in the X509 system, a certificate authority issues a certificate binding a public key to a particular distinguished name in the X500 tradition, or to an alternative name such as an email address. So an organization trusted root certificate can be distributed to all the employees so that they can use the company's PKI system. So if we have implemented a PKI infrastructure for our user authentication in our organization, we can use the X509 certificates by configuring the ABAP front-end server or HANA to accept the certificates. So the Fiori application can send the request directly to the front-end server and the SAP backend server and to the HANA server. So all those requests are authenticated by each of these systems depending on which the recipient system is. So which system should be configured for X509 certificate authentication depends on the type of app we are using. So what does that mean is that if we are using the transactional apps, so the setup of X509 certificate authentication for the front-end server only. If we are using the fact sheet apps, then we have to set up the X509 certificate authentication for both front-end server as well as the back-end server. Similarly, for the SAP Smart Business app, we have to set up the X509 certificate authentication for my front-end server as well as my SAP HANA Extended Application Service. So this is how my SSO2, my SAML 2.0 and X509 works for my single sign-on. Now, this slide is showing the authentication methods and the SSO enablements for different type of apps. So we have in the first column, we have the authentication method for SSO. So basically the username and the password type of authentication, it works for all my app types, whether it is a transactional app, fact sheet app, analytical app, or my search. And my Kerberos will only work for my transactional apps and my fact sheets. So it doesn't work for the analytical apps or the search. Then we have SAML 2.0. Again, similar to the Kerberos, it only works for transactional apps and the fact sheets. However, we cannot use the SAML for my analytical apps or the search. Then we can use the SAP logon tickets or the X509 certificates for all my app types. Now let's move further. Then we have the SAP Fiori user management. So my users must exist in my SAP NetWeaver Gateway ABAP frontend for all the app types. They should exist in the SAP Business Suite backend for the all app types, and the user should exist in my HANA DB only for my fact sheets and analytical apps. So my username must be the same in both ABAP systems and the HANA system. So if the customer utilizes all three type of apps, we have to make sure the username comply with the stricter restriction rule from SAP HANA. So for the user sync between the ABAP server, we can use the CUA or IDM. So these can be implemented and these user management tools can be utilized for the user syncing. Now let's move further. So basically the same name or the same username is needed for my gateway, my backend, and my HANA system. So we can use the central user administration, or we can use the existing identity management system to synchronize the users in the backend and the front-end ABAP systems to ensure the user's name on the both systems matches. So this is the prerequisite for the user management in case of SAP Fiori. Now, after the user management, we have to see the authorizations, like how the user authorizations happens. So my user authorizations, first of all, we will look at the user authorization at my NetWeaver gateway level. So my user authorization happens at the NetWeaver gateway. It can be for the front end, it can be for the backend server. So we will look at these one by one. So at my NetWeaver gateway, my NetWeaver gateway provides the predefined roles as templates for an administrator, user, developer user, content user, as well as my display user. So the role templates are available when we install the SAP NetWeaver Gateway component. We configure the roles based on the provided templates and assign the users to those roles. So the role templates specify the authorizations for content that can be accessed by the users of specific consumer server application. So using the predefined roles in a specific application, we can designate a user or a group of users as a unit, such as a manager, employee, purchaser, supplier, and many more. So these users have access to the specific content and resources in that application. So for the SAP NetWeaver Gateway Framework Administrator role, we have the template which we can copy, and so we have the role template and we have the profile for it. So we can copy this template, we can create our own in our customer namespace, and after that we can assign the users to this new role. So my administrator role name can be based on any standard administrator role name. So for the SAP NetWeaver Gateway Framework developer role, again we have certain templates, and similarly we can copy these templates and we can create our own for as per our requirement. So the same we have for the BOR developer, and we have it for the general user role. So this way we can copy the existing templates and we can create our own customized role and assign the users to it. So my role template for enabling all the users and user groups to access all OData services in my SAP NetWeaver Gateway system. So we maintain this role for users and their authorizations in the profile generator using the transaction PFCG. So my authorizations and roles in SAP NetWeaver Gateway, we use them to authorize to the access HTML5 based SAP Fiori applications and the OData services in my SAP NetWeaver Gateway. So we use the PFCG transaction to create a service or app specific role with the authorization object s underscore service, and we do not specify the further authorization values. So on the tab menu, on the menu tab, we basically insert a node into the role menu by choosing the authorization default, which is TADIR service, and then we can choose the object type and the program ID and the service which we want to add to this new role. Then we generate the profile and we assign this new role to the Fiori app user. So we will see that in the system once we will be logging into the system, and we will see the hands-on exercise for it. Now, so this screen is telling this is taken from the PFCG transaction. The screenshot is taken from there. So in this we can see that we have 5 tabs here. That is the description, we have the menu, we have authorizations, then we have the user and personalization. So we have to first specify the role name and the description to that particular role. After that we have to insert the under the menu we have to enter the TADI services. Then we have to specify the profiles in authorization, and then we have to add users to this role using this user tab. Now, after that, we have the SAP Fiori user authorization in the front end and in my back end. So my like in the authorizations and roles in my front end server for the fact sheets only. So first discuss, let's first discuss this one. So my authorizations for the business server pages on my front end server, they comes under the this authorization for my fact sheets only. So the SAP delivers one front-end authorization role for each component. So we can again copy the roles we require to our namespace and we assign the users to those roles. So the roles name and the technical names will end with underscore FSA for my fact sheets. Now on this right hand side we can see the screenshot wherein I have the role name, technical name of the role, and the description of that role. So basically these are the default roles which are available to us for the fact sheets. Now after that then comes the authorization and roles for the launchpad. So basically my SAP Fiori Launchpad catalogs and the UI PFCG roles which bundle all my front-end privileges required for the execution of the apps. So through the user assignment to my backend roles, additional privileges are provided to execute the applications or the OData services. After that, we have the authorizations and role in the ABAP backend server, that is for my transactional apps and my fact sheets. So first of all, we provide the authorizations for the OData service for the apps. Then SAP delivers the backend PFCG rules for every transactional app and the fact sheet. So the roles for the transactional apps do not comprise the authorizations for my business data to be displayed in the app. It is assumed that these authorizations will be provided by the customer. So the roles for fact sheets contain the authorizations to display the business data and also include the search models related to the fact sheets. So the user requires certain authorizations that allow the services of the application to be triggered in the backend. So to use the SAP Fiori fact sheets for a certain component, the users require the authorizations included in the related front-end authorization role. So we can find the role's name and the technical name in the documentation of each fact sheet. So the role is designed to grant authorizations for the business server pages for the fact sheets. The authorizations required for a particular application are provided using the PFCG role delivered for each application. Now let's come to the system now, and then we will see how we have to create these roles in our system. So if I go to my Fiori system and I log on here, So we have the front end system and we have the back end system. So we have to create these authorizations in both of our systems. So in the front end, we have to add the authorizations for our front end server. Then in the back end, we have to add the authorizations for our back end server. So now let's log into the front end server first. So I will just continue with it. Now, in this, we have to go to the transaction PFCG. So first of all, let's see what are the authorizations which are available to us for the Fiori Launchpad administrator role. So we have the role which is already delivered by SAP for the Launchpad administrator role, which is SAP UI Admin 700. So if I go here and if I click on this display, so I will be able to see under the menu like which all services are included inside this. So I can see that we have the different services which are already included in this role. Then what we have to do is generally we don't change the default roles. Rather, what we do is we copy them and we include the roles like create the custom roles and we assign them to the users. So let's see how we copy this role. So we have this option of copying this existing role from here. We click on this copy role. After that, we have to enter the name here. So we can give the name as Z underscore and we can give it as test. Then we can click on this copy all. And if we click on this edit, that is the change. So we will be able to see that this role is copied from my predefined role which came with my installation, and the description of this is that it is a administrator role for all authorizations for all basic web services. Now if I go to the menu, I can see that all the services which were assigned to my default role, they are now assigned to my this role as well. Now if I want to change this and if I want to add few more services to it, I can go here and I can choose this authorization default. I can select the TADIR service from here, and then from this I have to change. I can select IWSG, IWSV. So depending on a requirement, I have to choose this option. So let's say if I choose this one, the WebDimpro application. Now I can choose any service which is existing. If I know the name of the service, I can directly copy here, or I can take this F4 help to select the service name. So this way we can choose the services from here and we can add it to our system. Now, since we have not added any new service, so we can just close this window. Otherwise, we can click on the copy. So once we select the services, they will be added to my menu. Now, after that, we have to go to the authorization, and in the authorization, we have to define the profile name. So we can use this propose profile name and it will automatically load the profile and the profile text based on the role we have used. Then we have to generate this profile. So we'll click on this change authorization data. So it is asking that we must save the role first. Now we have this generate option here. So we have to click on this generate. So once we have clicked on it, we will be able to go back And we can see that this authorization icon is turned to green now. So it is not red. So now we have to go to the user. We have to select the user ID to which we want to assign this role. So if we know the username, we can directly write the username, or we can write down the star to choose from all the user list. So say if I want to assign it to my Fiori server user. So I can copy this. So if I click on here, it will automatically take the information, that is the username, from the user ID we have entered. After that, we have to click on this user comparison, and we have to click on the complete comparison. Now I can save this rule. So basically what we have done is that we have created, we have copied the pre-existing role for our administrator. We have added the few services, or we can add the few services which we want from this menu. Then we have to create the profile under the authorizations, and then we have to generate this profile. Later on, we have to go to the users and we can add the users to it. So this way we can create the use the predefined roles which come up with our installation, and we can choose them, and we can add the services to them. So now let's take an example of an app which comes up with the Fiori. So with every Fiori app, we already have the OData services which come up by default, and we already have the certain authorizations and the rules which come up as default with them. So for that, we can choose, we can use the Fiori documentation which is there, and we have to take the services name from there. We can create our own role. We can add those services here, and then we can add our Fiori system users to those new customized roles. So this way we can do the authorizations, we can create the users, we can set the authorizations. Now if we want, we can use the transaction which is SU01. So we can enter the username here if we know the user, or we can go to the F4 help. So this SU01 transaction, we can see the roles which are assigned to a particular user. So let's say if I want to check for the Fiori server. So I can click on the display, and under the roles I will be able to see which all roles it has. So all the roles will be, I will be able to see all the roles which are there, which are assigned to this user. So this way we can check which user has what roles assigned to it. Now let's see how we can check, like for which Fiori app, which all default roles or which all default authorization objects we have. So let's take an example of My Spend app, which is a Fiori app that comes up with the Fiori applications. So if I go to my help pages for Fiori at help.sap.com, so I will be able to see all the app details which are there under my Fiori applications. So if I go to this my spend app implementation section, I can see that for the backend components, the default PFCG role which is there is my SAP FIN SPEMON app. Similarly, for the front-end components, we have this business role already provided by SAP Fiori, which is this role. So we can copy these two in our respective backend server and the front-end server, and we can create our own customized rules for these. So let's see how we can find these rules into my system. So if I go to my backend server, and if I log into it, So again, in my backend server also, I can go to the PFCG and I can search for this role. So for this MySpend app, for the backend server, I have this SAP FIN SPEMON app. So I can directly write down SAP underscore FIN underscore star, and I can search for the roles, default roles, which come up with my this which starts with my SAP FIN. So I can see here and I can search for this particular role. So this is my role for my spent application. I can just select this, and again I can go to the display, and under the menu I can see which service is assigned to this role. So my service, that is the SRA012 Spent SRV, this is the default OData service which comes up with this MySpend app. Now under the authorizations, I can see the profile name, what profile name is associated with it, and I can choose the user and I can add any user to this authorization role. So basically, it's not recommended that we do the changes in the default roles. Rather, it's always preferable that we have to copy this role and then we have to do the changes to it. Now, similarly, if I go back to my front-end server and under my PFCG, I can choose the role which was there for my front end. So my business role, which is delivered by default with this MySpend app, is SAP FIN underscore BCR underscore cost manager underscore X1. So we have to choose this one, that is this role, and I can click on display. So if I click on display and go to the menu again, so I can see that we have these two services, two customized services which are assigned to this cost manager app role. So I can again copy this if I want, and I can create a new customized role with it. So I can directly copy it and I can create a new role. So now I can click on this change, and under the menu I will be able to see the services which are there. So I can go to the transaction. If I want to add a new service, I can go to the authorization default. I can select TADIR. From this I have to select the IWSG. And from the list of the services available, we can select any of the service which we want to add to this role. So let's see, let's take an example. Say if I want to add this Z demo. So I can just select this service and I can click on copy. So now I can see that I have the new service which I have just selected, that is the Z demo SUDSRV. So this is added under my menu. Now I can go to the authorizations. I can click on this proposed profile name, and then I have to click on the change authorization data to generate my profile. So I can go here and I can click on this generate. So once generated, I can go back and under the users I can add the users whichever I want to add to this role. So these are the already existing users, so we can add the new users also from this menu, and then we have to save this. So this way we can create the custom roles. We can add the users to those custom roles for my front-end server, back-end server, for my gateway, for my administrator. So this is how we do the authorizations and how we set up the security in SAP Fiori. So this is basically the end of this session. So in this session, we have discussed about the different authentication methods, how we create the users, how we do the user managements, how we manage the authorizations, how we manage the roles and the users inside each of the touch point of